Hello and welcome. My name is Jake and I'm joined by Charlie as we discuss the world of football with a focus on data. This is Football with the Faff. Right, okay, so we've had the second week of Premier League games now. How did you feel it went?
It was an interesting week. I think most things you would have expected probably happened. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, not too many surprises, and maybe we can start with one that for some people may not have been a surprise in Brighton beating Man United 2-1.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't a surprise for me. I was mildly positive about the Man United performance despite the loss. I thought Brighton were the slightly better team, but I thought if United could have kept on side and kept their concentration a little bit more with the set pieces, they'd have been alright. But yeah, I mean, as a neutral, what did you think?
Yeah, I thought certainly as the game went on, it became a lot more open. The midfields came a bit more spread, and you started to have some success with your wingers, which I don't think you did with Rashford on, or certainly not as much. But yeah, I mean, Brighton had chances. Welbeck hit the bar, and I don't know. You can never really trust your team to sort of see out a game properly. There's always the chance that they slip up, and obviously, I think that Brighton were worth the win, but you could have definitely snatched something as well. And always when there's a late goal, it's the frustration. But I thought it was disgraceful that Brighton had two players free at your back post to score. It was ridiculous. You can't do that. You can't.
Yeah, it was shambolic. I mean, and from a set piece as well. I mean, those things are meant to be planned out to the T. Everyone's meant to know their jobs. Ball gets cleared, second ball comes in, and there's three players at the back post. Any of them could have scored. And the other one, I'm not one to pile on Maguire at all. Very positive about him.
Yeah.
Think he's deserved his chance in the team. But that first goal was abysmal. He misses the first challenge where when that ball comes in from the cross and he doesn't clear it, that's unforgivable first. And the second one, he starts to move towards the ball, looks behind him, realises there are two players behind him, and he's also put himself in an angle where he can't stop the cross. So I thought both goals were really, really poor ones to concede.
Yeah, and I think as well, sort of for your goal with Ahmad, Brighton didn't defend brilliantly there. He was able to cut in dead easy, didn't need to do anything too crazy, and then obviously the deflection just confirms that it's a goal. But yeah, neither side dominated, but I don't think you can begrudge it too much that Brighton won.
Yeah, and just to pick one man of the match out again, going through the stats, so you kind of get everything you expect. But one of the ones that stood out was Kobe Mainoo, who again talked about last week in that he's seen as this, especially by Man United fans, as Casemiro is the warrior, the boy that wins the ball back. He plays kind of 5-yard passes and he's meant to scrap. And Mainoo's the one that gracefully kind of glides with the ball all the way through to Bruno or the wingers. But again, Mainoo was top for tackles and interceptions. 5 interceptions, 2 tackles. He's certainly building a little bit of a more all-action profile in the midfield, which we didn't see last year. So that's something to, again, keep your eye on, because that could eventually remove the need for Casemiro.
Yeah, well, obviously he's not getting any younger, and surely you're going to be looking for that transition sort of as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say on Casemiro as well, there's rumours that Manuel Ugarte is going to come in. I know very little about him apart from he's again meant to be quite an all-action midfielder in that wins the ball back a fair bit and plays the ball a fair bit. You could then have him and Mainoo parallel rather than kind of one being defined as winning the ball and the other playing it. But who knows? I was pleasantly surprised, and I think the game did show that Mainu looked in control. He's just a fantastic player, and it's nice to see him develop other sides of his game as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And as an England fan, I can attest to that. And I think that he does have a very bright future, and the trajectory's on. It's worrying because he's at United, but exciting for hopefully the international games. Okay, so next let's move on to my game, Spurs Everton, an absolute thrashing, 4-0. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, going into the game I did sort of expect us to win. I mean, Everton were awful last week, but after us letting Leicester get back in the game and then leaving all square, there was a part of me that just worried a little bit. Just you can never be too sure with Spurs, but Basuma has had just about the best comeback he could after the disciplinary issue, and it'd be interesting to see what happens going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Spurs were kind of the antithesis of Everton. They looked together, strong on the set pieces, comfortable on the ball, alert, ready, quick. I thought Everton looked slow. I was surprised how kind of unorganised they looked, because no matter how bad a Sean Dyche team tends to look, you always tend to think they know where they're meant to be, but the players look lost. Pickford's had a couple of fantastic seasons in goal. Is he due another bad one? I mean, what a terrible mistake that was.
Oh, God. Especially to Son. Like, it's not a slow play or anything. It's just one that is hungry. Will run you down, and
yeah. But I've got a couple of players I want to highlight. So first, I want to get your thoughts on Son down the middle in general and just against Everton as well.
Yeah, I think I was a bit surprised when the team sheet came out, and obviously he was playing down the middle. I wasn't too surprised that Odegaard started. There was quite a bit of talk around the club after he joined, saying that Ange quite likes him, and obviously he's young as well. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't too sure if Richarlison would go straight in because he's been suffering with an injury sort of throughout pre-season and stuff, so that could be a reason as to why Son was just nailed for the start. But yeah, I think he's not, again, as I said before, I like a striker with presence, someone that can sort of make the defenders uncomfortable and get into them. And Son is much more focused on, trying to run in behind or trying to sort of cut in on his right foot or something like that. And again, I don't think he'll be starting many games up front. Hopefully Solanke's back now and we don't have to worry about that. And I prefer him on the wing, but it depends if he gets the opportunity to still cut inside and get a shot away. Because if he's just sort of being a touchline winger and doesn't get those opportunities, then I think it limits him.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think maybe one of the things I thought when I watched that performance on Saturday was how kind of more, maybe mature is the wrong word, but aware Son looked that he was playing centre forward. I think the one criticism you can have whenever he's stuck up there is he's a fantastic finisher, but when he's stuck at centre forward, he doesn't always seem to know where to be. He often puts himself with his back to goal, which obviously is useless for a player like Son. But I mean, he was chasing lost causes. I thought he was getting himself in really good positions and playing well with Maddison so that he didn't really have to play with his back to goal. I mean, he only put himself up for one aerial duel, whereas I've seen plenty of games where he's kind of just watching the ball go over his head, trying to jump for it, because that's how you would have played with Kane. I thought all round Son looked a lot more comfortable in centre forward than I've seen probably ever.
Yeah, and just on that as well, I think there were 2 times where Son sort of dropped a little deeper and Maddison made that run through the middle, and Romero just put a ball over the top to him, and Pickford made some sort of good saves. It was good movement by him, but it was just like sort of seeing a different dynamic. And look, I think it's tough to know exactly what works well because we were playing Everton. Like they are just all over the place at the minute. But certainly I did like some moves such as that, where it was just okay. You maybe expect Son to keep making runs through the middle. He's fast. That's his thing. But it's like, okay, what if we do someone else, or Son moves slightly wider, or things like that. And I think the biggest thing I saw has to be Van de Ven's run for the fourth goal. I mean, that was crazy. Just he got the ball just outside our box and pretty much got to theirs before he laid it off. It was stunning.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But just on that, the player I actually wanted to highlight in this game was his partner, Christian Romero. So I'm a huge Romero fan, and going through the stats, so obviously Van de Ven's run is in there, but Romero kind of tops everything you could think of. I mean, his pass completion was fantastic. He had the highest total distance passing, highest progressive distance as well, which was higher than Van de Ven's. He had there was another stat that I rarely like to look at, but it just stood out so much. His total carrying distance and progressive carrying distance were a mile more than any other player in the Spurs team, including the midfielders, which I just think, for a centre-back who's making a load of passes, pushing himself forwards, he's so comfortable carrying the ball, he's so comfortable passing. He also made the most tackles, most interceptions. He won all 3 of his aerial duels. It's just fantastic for me.
Yeah, he seems to be sort of getting better and better, and he keeps being linked with Real Madrid and stuff. And I think as a Spurs fan, you're sort of sick of them taking our best players. But I mean, yeah, as long as we have him, I think we'll love him because he gives everything. Okay, so next up was Man City Ipswich. Now, obviously, that game started with a little bit of a surprise, with Schmodix just about squeezing a goal. I think it just about bounced through Ederson's legs and trickled over the line. How did you see sort of Ipswich coming into this one? Did you think they just didn't stand a chance? Do you think maybe they could have snatched something?
To be honest, I looked through the stats as well, and I honestly don't have anything to say on it because everything you'd expect was there. There was nothing kind of outrageous or impressive. It was exactly as you'd expect, and I think the game was about the same. Ipswich would hit City on the counter. I mean, City are famous in these games that they should be winning for going 1 behind and then going 6 in front by the next 20 minutes. I thought Ipswich were going to struggle. They did struggle. It was nice to see Smodix come in and start his Premier League campaign well. Other than that, yeah, City dominant. The other team sitting off them, trying to see what they can get on the counter-attack. I think that's going to be another theme for every single team they play for the year.
Yeah, and again, another side not helped by their keeper. He made some rash decisions. First of all, getting caught on the ball, and then obviously for the third goal, he comes out, doesn't get the ball. Haaland goes round him, and it's a somewhat tight angle, but you expect Haaland to score then. So I think they'll be a little disappointed with some of the goals they conceded. Obviously, the penalty as well, but at the end of the day, they were outclassed.
Yeah, as you'd expect, and you can't really criticise Ipswich for that. You just hope they learnt a little bit from it and keep working hard, because you're not going to play Man City every week. So, yeah, really little to say on that, other than I think everything that we expected happened.
Yeah. Okay, so next up was Crystal Palace against West Ham. Now, Palace had a hell of a lot of chances in the first half. I don't know how they didn't score. There was some poor finishing. Eze hit the bar, and you sort of, I don't know, it gets to a point, I think a little bit like Spurs last week, where you're creating all these chances, but you've got to score, You're playing this nice football, you're getting through, but when you don't put one away, guess what? You get punished. And that's exactly what West Ham did. Their first goal was very scrappy. I don't even know how many players were involved in the box, but it somehow deflected in. And then obviously Bowen sort of tops it off a little later on with where he cuts in and just fires it in near post. What did you make of the game?
Yeah, kind of echo everything you said and just how you ended it. I think Bowen's the player I want to talk about as well. I mean, Bowen's obviously seen as a really good finisher, good player on the counter-attack, obviously scored. But I think what stood out was Bowen created the most opportunities for West Ham as well. So 5 key passes for Bowen is more than you usually see because he tends to be the one finishing off the moves, even though he's playing on the wing. So yeah, I was really impressed with him. And the other one I was really impressed with was Max Kilman. Apart from the yards of his passing, there's not really any stats that stood out. But I thought he was fantastic. He just looked so in control. He was brilliant on the ball and off it. You could see him organising a couple of times at corners, which is nice to see. Yeah, just really, really impressed with Kilman. And Bowen was the one that stood out numbers-wise. So they're the 2 players I want to highlight, really.
Yeah, and I think it's a good first win for Lopetegui. Because, Selhurst isn't the easiest place to go. They can for sure turn it on. And I think Palace haven't quite got motoring yet. I don't think many people would have said they would have got 0 points from their first 2. But they weren't hopeless. They should have scored. And, I'm sure that they will improve soon.
Yeah, and talking of not quite getting going yet, I think Mateta is the kind of embodiment of what Palace are at the moment. He was fantastic at the end of last year. Everything he seemed to touch turned to gold. And against West Ham, he had one shot that wasn't on target with a 0.3 XG, so a fairly decent chance. For a lad his size, he lost all 3 of his aerial duels. One of the lowest number of touches on the pitch. He's just kind of embodying what Palace are at the moment, which is a team of really exciting players that sadly right now are just underperforming.
Yeah. I think, maybe a lot of people will start making things about it, but I really don't see them struggling much as the season goes on. I think it's just a little difficult. Obviously, Mateta was at the Olympics not too long ago. Is he 100% fit and firing for the season? I don't know. But yeah, I think we'll soon sort of see a turnaround and they'll start moving up the league again.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you never want to see excuses, but it's hard to account to lose Olise, Gahey, Anderson, obviously potentially Gahey, in one window, and not really spend that much money to replace them. I mean, it's a big ask. Obviously, I hope Palace do, and I mean, they could still lose Eze as well, but it's going to be hard to lose, potentially your club captain and your centre-back that's settled next to him for a long time, and your star player. And you can't just expect to turn it on straight away.
Yeah. I would be a little concerned with sort of how they've spent the money they've received. It doesn't feel like it equates to it, but obviously with all the financial fair play, everyone's trying to just make profit, I think, at the minute.
Yeah, I read this morning that I think Premier League spending is down something like more than 600 million in this window, which is absolutely nuts. But and it's still, even what we've spent is still considerably more than any other league.
Oh yeah.
But
that's the
it's
thing.
a large amount of money that just isn't being spent. Maybe people are finally taking FFP seriously now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like some of these clubs spend ridiculously. They just keep, bringing more players in, and it's just like, guess what? Eventually, that will catch up to you. yeah, I think these sort of regulations need to be in place because you don't want. Obviously, for your club, it's nice to just say, "Oh, we can get whoever we want," but you want that good competition, and you want the good competition between the leagues as well.
Yeah, and if you get a chance to read it, I think Gary Neville's book kind of gives an opinion on it very well without really any solution, which is the embodiment of Gary Neville. But I think he's got a point in that you want someone to come in and be able to go, look, I'm going to buy this really small team, I'm going to spend a load of money on it, and we're going to make this local little village the best team in England, and we're going to bring them up to the Champions League. That should be possible. But the issue is, it needs to be done responsibly, because we need to make sure we're in a situation where if that person walks away, the club doesn't go under, the club isn't in trouble of existing. There needs to be a fine line. Like everyone talks about Blackburn when they were bought and ended up winning the Premier League, which is a fantastic story. And that should be possible. You should be able to have a millionaire go to his local club that he loves and goes, I'm going to buy him and this is going to be my project for retirement or something. But there needs to be protection that if that millionaire walks away, the bills aren't so excessive that the club would go under.
Yeah, and when there's these giant figures of money chucked about, it can get very scary very quickly. There's a lot of clubs that are struggling or the potential of going under, and it is really tough to see how it can be balanced. Obviously the focus is on the Prem, and there's not as much light shed on the lower leagues or non-league, and you just want everyone to be able to enjoy their club, enjoy their community, and have a fair fight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, there's no right answer. At the end of the day, you can either be too cautious and it means that maybe the bigger teams end up staying at the top, or you could be not cautious at all and you end up with clubs dying and ceasing to exist. I mean, if you're gonna go one way or the other, I'd rather us go on the cautious side of the spectrum. But it is a shame that these teams that maybe do have the money, obviously I'm not a big fan of nation states buying teams, for example, but
yeah,
if Newcastle have the money and they can spend it responsibly, they should be able to spend it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Fulham Leicester now. Ended 2-1. A good game for Smith Rowe, I thought. Grabbed his first goal in front of the home fans, and yeah, I thought Fulham played quite well, really.
Yeah, again, one of those where kind of got what we expected. We thought Fulham would be the better team. Leicester would kind of give something on the counter-attack, but in the end, Fulham's quality would show. In terms of stats, there was one quite exciting one which I thought was quite funny, in that Leicester made 30 clearances in the game, which was way more than anyone else this weekend. And watching it back, it didn't look like there were a load of balls swinging in the box that Leicester were clearing or anything like that. So I'm not really sure where that came from, if I'm honest. But yeah.
Yeah, I to be honest with Leicester, I've become less optimistic with them as I've watched them. I don't think their quality is as good now as I thought it was. Obviously, this is still early days, but I don't know who they can go up against and sort of show their worth. It feels like that sort of band of teams is getting smaller. Obviously, they did equalise with Faff, but I didn't feel like they were ever going to win it, and Iwobi ended up scoring a similar goal to Smith Rowe as well. So it's almost that they're not learning from the mistakes they're making. So yeah, I'm starting to get a bit worried for Leicester. Obviously, they could have a points deduction, and that could ultimately decide their fate. But I've expected a little bit more of a glimmer of hope for them than I've seen so far.
Yeah, and just to play the other side of that, I thought Fulham were brilliant, and I think that was kind of exactly how Marco Silva wants to play. I think we talked a little bit before about how Andreas Pereira's role might change with Smith Rowe coming in that Pereira's going to drop deeper. And I thought this weekend it really worked. They were both really involved in all the build-up, and they didn't lose kind of Pereira's rawness, crossing the ball just in front of the striker kind of thing. He was everywhere, Pereira, and I think that allowed Smith Rowe to be a little bit more free. That might not necessarily work against the teams that are going to have more of the ball against them, but I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. And the other player to highlight, we give Anthony Robinson a lot of credit. He's meant to be one of the best fullbacks in the league, seen as a really modern kind of bombing on wing-back style fullback, but he was actually the leader for tackles and interceptions on the weekend. So
Oh, wow.
just a little bit of shout out to Anthony Robinson's defensive abilities as well.
Yeah, I think, he's starting to sort of get a good bit of recognition for him, and I think it's really good for Fulham. They can start building again. I think after they lost Mitrovic a little while ago now, people start to go, are they gonna dip? Are they gonna fall down a bit? But I think they're probably playing better than they were back then. I think it's a bright future for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I thought they played fairly well against Man United and backed it up with a decent performance against Leicester.
Yep. Right, so the final 3 o'clock game on Saturday was Southampton against Forest. What do you think of Southampton?
Yeah, I mean, echo everything that everyone said about Burnley last year is probably about right. This is the way Russell Martin's going to play. He's made it very clear he's not going to sell himself out for a couple of results in the Premier League. He believes this is the way to make progress. Good on him, but you got to have the players to do it, and at the moment it just doesn't look like they do. Another weekend where they had a load of the ball but didn't really create enough from it. I mean, for almost 70% of the ball they created 0.1 xg. That's not on in the Premier League. That just can't happen. But yeah, another frustrating one, and especially against a team like Nottingham Forest, who probably are going to be down there again this year. You can't really have that much of the ball and create so little.
Yeah, and the goal that Gibbs White ends up scoring, where he sort of gets a header, defender blocks it, but then it falls straight back to him to hit it into an empty net. You can't be playing like that, and you can't be conceding goals like that against your rivals for this season. They're the teams that you've got to get at least a point from, because otherwise it could just decide your fate before even halfway through the season.
Yeah, the one kind of difference between Southampton and Burnley last year was that I thought Burnley were wasteful. They tended to be quite unorganised. The goals they conceded looked a mess. Southampton look fairly structured, and they obviously know what they're doing. They've had Russell Martin for a year now. They've got players that play that way. My worry with Southampton is I just don't think they have the players. I mean, Bednarek and Jack Stevens at centre back in 2024 is a worry. I think they look structured. They know what they're doing, keeping the ball well. Obviously, not creating anything is a huge issue, but I just don't think they have the players. That's my difference between them and Burnley. Oh, sorry, one more shout out in that game. I totally forgot to say. Going through the stats again, fairly boring game, fairly boring set of stats. But a massive I hate you to Jan Bednarek, who completed 121 of his 122 passes he attempted. So whatever that one was, I hope it keeps you up at night, Jan. Yes. That was all I had to say on the stats for that game.
I'm sure he's crying about it right now. But then the evening game was obviously a big fixture at the other end of the table. Villa hosted Arsenal, and unfortunately, Watkins couldn't finish, and Arsenal could.
Yeah, so I was out. I went to Bristol City Coventry on the weekend, so I made it back to watch this one live in the pub. I thought Villa looked pretty decent. I thought David Raya was brilliant in goal for Arsenal, and Martinez had a nightmare for Arsenal second, and that killed the game. I thought Villa looked okay. Morgan Rogers was the standout for me. I don't know about you, but when I watched it, I thought he looked really impressive. I thought that's the sign of a real title contending team for Arsenal. It was a tough game, tough place to go, and even though Villa looked good, I never got the feeling Arsenal were gonna drop any points in that game.
Yeah, obviously as a Spurs fan, it was a disappointing game for me to watch. Yeah, I think sort of Villa's a tricky one because we know what they're capable of, but it's almost like they're halfway through a step. They're not quite there to tussle all the time. They have to be sort of in the groove, and I think you sort of saw that in the game where they're playing some nice stuff. They're creating chances. There were some good saves, but ultimately, when you've got that quality, you can break a team down, you can find ways to score, and sort of once it went 2-0, I didn't think there was any hope for Villa.
No, yeah, I thought it was a really professional performance from Arsenal is probably the right word. And yeah, I mean, they certainly look like they're going to be up there again this year.
Boo. Okay, so moving on to Sunday's game now. We've got Bournemouth-Newcastle, which ended 1-1, depending who you ask. I mean, it was a good game. Bournemouth were very good. I was a bit surprised after last week how good they were. And someone who I've said I like before, Semenyo, I thought he was brilliant.
Yeah, really like Semenyo in the Championship. Really glad he's shining at Bournemouth as well in the Premier League. Bournemouth created the higher XG, but Newcastle had a lot more of the ball, which was a very weird situation for Newcastle to be in because they don't tend to have a lot of the ball. But yeah, I think a draw was probably just about the right result. I think Joelinton should have been sent off. I'd like to add.
Yeah, I mean, let's go through the chaos of added time. So, in the 93rd minute, Bournemouth have a corner, crossed in, and was it Odwara? I think it was him that scores. Obviously, VAR have a look at it, and it sort of hits his shoulder, high arm, sort of like just about where the badge is on the sleeve, and they deem that a factual handball. So at that point, the referee on the pitch cannot get involved. They've said that's handball. It's a fact. I wasn't thrilled by that rule. Not the rule that the ref can't get involved, but the fact that of where it hits his arm, because I just think at what point do you factually say the shoulder becomes the arm? And I still think there's a bit of ambiguity if you get to the high part of the arm.
Yeah, I mean this is where it gets really frustrating to hear these things on the radio, because I went to Swansea Cardiff on Sunday after our little detour to Bristol City, and I was listening to TalkSport on the way, and they were talking about this T-shirt line again, and the T-shirt line is for body, unnatural position, and this kind of intentional handball. The Bournemouth goal, right, whether you like the rule or not, which is totally up to opinion, I think unfortunately it was the right decision to rule it out, because there's no rule on T-shirt line, all of that. It's if the ball goes directly in off a player and it's off his arm, it doesn't count. There's no ambiguity. It is a factual decision that was brought in a couple of years ago. there is no need to argue whether we're talking about a t-shirt line or whatever. If it's hit his arm and goes in the goal directly, the goal is always going to be ruled out now. Whether you like the rule or not, unfortunately, in the law, it was the right decision.
Yeah, it is frustrating with stuff like that as well, because, obviously, on the pitch it's given, and you have that elation of, a last minute winner, of snatching all 3 points. Not that, Bournemouth, didn't do enough to deserve it, but, getting it that late on. And then obviously the tension in the stadium sort of went through the roof, and you see that down the other end when Neto grabs the ball, starts running out, and Joe Linton just sort of throws an arm around him. And I mean, it was a bit of a shock because earlier in the game, Bernard sort of, stepped across Neto to stop him releasing quickly. And then this was, putting that to a 10 in terms of sort of force used. I was watching it live, and I mean, the commentator said, I don't know if this is true, but apparently that VAR didn't even look at it. So I don't really know why you wouldn't. I don't know if it's because it's so close to the end of the game they were just like, well, let's just finish it. I don't know.
Everyone wanted to get home.
Yeah, but I mean, it was very forceful. I get his hand didn't like grab his throat or his face, but when you sort of, wrap someone around like that, he practically clotheslined him.
Yeah, I mean, a very weak attempt at trying to move away from what was probably the most important part of the game and the refereeing decisions. I'm going to read out some stats to you, and I'm going to tell you now, they're Bournemouth's, not Newcastle. And having watched the game, this really surprised me. So Bournemouth made 20 fouls to Newcastle's 8, which it certainly didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Bournemouth had less touches of the ball, 39% possession. They won more aerial duels. They almost doubled the number of clearances Newcastle made. They put in 85 long balls, where Newcastle were just over 60. I didn't feel that at all watching that game. If anything, I thought Newcastle were the more kind of direct, forceful team, and Bournemouth looked a little bit more kind of build through the thirds, comfortable in possession. I read those stats and I thought that was really baffling, if I'm honest.
I think that would be largely down to about halfway through the second half, maybe a bit sooner. Newcastle brought on Hall and Willock, and sort of after that you saw them, it seemed like they were really starting to get a grip on Bournemouth, and the pressure was mounting and mounting. Now Hall almost plays in midfield at times. He's obviously more focused on the left, but he'll come inside to the centre, and things start switching around, and suddenly you've got 2 more people to think about where you only had 1 before. So I think that largely would have been their best phase of play and may have boosted their stats a bit. But yeah, over the course of the game, I wouldn't have really thought that.
No, neither. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the game that actually wasn't on TV on Sunday, but was by far the biggest scoreline, was Wolves Chelsea, which I predicted a 1-0 Wolves, and you predicted, was it 2-0 Chelsea, I think?
Yeah, I had to watch this back later, but I was sitting in the stadium at Swansea Cardiff, and I just couldn't believe it when I saw the result. Yeah, and even more when I looked through the stats, I couldn't believe that Wolves had a higher XG before I watched the game. But yeah, obviously the big thing was Madueke getting a hat-trick out of a 0.6 XG in the game. Is pretty phenomenal, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chelsea have some really good individuals, and I think this is a really good example of, if it clicks, it can click really, really well. Wolves looked unorganised. They looked a bit messy, not really sure where they're meant to be, kind of echoing Everton away at Spurs, which again is not very like a structured Wolves team from Gary O'Neill, which we'd expect. But yeah, I think this was the perfect thing of if Chelsea click, they can tear teams apart. And players coming off the bench with that big squad could play a real big part this season.
Yeah, it was a really crazy game. I mean, Nicholas Jackson scoring inside 2 minutes. And then Wolves equalise, and then Chelsea take the lead again, and then Wolves actually equalise again. So I think at half-time it was 2-2. And, I think if the game ended 2-2, you'd sort of go, oh, Chelsea's still not sort of, hitting the mark. But then, as you say, Madueke, wow. And I think Palmer deserves a shout-out as well. Assisted all of Madueke's goals and got a nice little lob as well for himself. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of positives to take for Chelsea. I felt that Wolves' second goal was a bit too easy. It's sort of a free kick that's then headed across, and there's a man just free. So I think they still need to improve a bit. But I mean, yeah, against Wolves, they're not the best at the minute. You can get chances. They won't put all their chances away either. So yeah, I reckon this could be the almost jumping point that Maresca needed.
Yeah, and a huge shout out to Chelsea's head of PR, who must be working overtime at the moment after Madueke's laps on Instagram and Nicholas Jackson following up with something equally as combative against was it John Obi Mikel?
I believe so.
So I think Chelsea's head of PR gets man of the match for me.
God, I mean, they must just attract these certain personalities, or I don't know, maybe they turn people into that, where it's just every couple of days there's some story breaking about one of their players. I mean, well, to be fair, they do own half the country, so,
Well, I think it's safe to say Madueke probably doesn't mind Wolverhampton anymore.
No, he can't wait to get back there. And then moving on to the final game, Liverpool-Brentford ended 2-0 Liverpool. I felt it was quite comfortable for them, really.
Yeah, another one where you just used the word professional. I mean, nothing stood out in the stats. Liverpool were dominant. Brentford put up a good fight, but at the end of the day, it was always going to be Liverpool's game. Be interesting when Liverpool put themselves up against a mega team in Man United next week. No,
Sorry, what?
it'll be interesting to see Liverpool go up against a team in theory of quality. Again, Man United never really tend to put that out on the pitch, but Liverpool have had a very comfortable start against Brentford and Ipswich, and they've looked comfortable as well. I think the biggest talking point of that game was Trent looking very unhappy when he came off. Yeah,
and obviously with the rumours and the stories sort of throughout the transfer window, I think that will always add fuel to the fire. I can understand why you don't want to get taken off, because you can smell that there could be more goals, and Trent loves to get forward, he loves to attack, he loves to be a part of it, and I don't think it's anything too deep with that. I think it's just what you see a lot of times where a player is just frustrated to come off. But I have to say, I thought the best part of the game was Liverpool's first goal. It was an incredible counter-attack. Jota plays the ball perfectly timed, perfectly weighted for Diaz, who runs through and has a good finish as well. I'm a bit worried about facing Liverpool because I think with Spurs' high line, if they break on us, we could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, again, I'm actually going to Liverpool, Man United Liverpool on the weekend, so very exciting one for me.
you got a box of tissues or something you can take for,
Yeah.
when it goes to double figures.
Box of tissues for when Garnacho scores, yeah.
What?
But yeah, I think Liverpool have started very comfortably, looked in control. It'll be interesting to see next week. Again, yeah, like you said, I think their first goal was certainly the highlight of the game for them. It's a shame that all the talk is about Trent and the sulking after the game rather than how decent Liverpool were. But yeah, I think the weekend will be a really interesting game, and Arne Slot's kind of first real, I don't want to say first real test because that's obviously disrespectful to Ipswich and Brentford, but first game of real...
It's a big game.
Yeah, first game of real
the
public
rivalry,
interest.
Yeah, the rivalry, the quality that should be on show.
Away at Old Trafford as well.
Yeah. You know, it might only be 3-0 this time, you know. But yeah, so those were the games from the weekend. I would have to say my player of the week has to be Madueke. I think, you know, calling out Wolverhampton and then burying them with a hat-trick. Not many can say they've done that. And then my team of the week, I don't want to be biased, but I'm going to say Spurs. 4 goals and a clean sheet. I'll take that every week, thank you.
Well, my player of the week was going to be Madueke as well, so I'll give it a little switch and I'll go with Romero as my player of the week.
No United player?
Yes, I'll go Romero for my player of the week just to mix it up. And seeing as you went with Spurs, the slam dunk for my team of the week is Chelsea, I think.
Yeah. There we go. We just swapped around, really. But yeah, so quite an interesting week, but not too many surprises. Let's have a look at the fixtures for this upcoming week. Obviously, it's the final week before the big international break. England's new caretaker manager. All sorts could be going on. So, first up on Saturday lunchtime, we have Arsenal-Brighton.
Yeah, so Arsenal-Brighton, I'm going to go with an Arsenal win. But I think Brighton will score. I thought Brighton showed enough on the counter-attack. And to be fair, they built enough of their own attacks against Man United anyways. But I'm getting the feeling Arsenal are really going to get some momentum going at the start of the season. So I'm going to go with a 3-1 Arsenal.
We're too similar. Because I've also gone for a 3-1 Arsenal. Yeah, a lot of the similarity to you. I think that Brighton can break them down. Arsenal haven't looked invulnerable in their games, I will say. Okay, they haven't conceded yet, but the teams have had chances. Obviously, Wolves rarely managed to score, and Rayo just pulled off some super saves for them. I reckon it won't be long before they start getting broken down a little.
Yeah.
The next game is Brentford-Southampton.
Oh, maybe you go first on this one, and I'll do it after you.
Okay, I'm just going to copy my score. I've gone for a 2-0 Brentford. Now, we saw against Palace that they can score without Tony. I mean, maybe we won't see Tony in a Brentford shirt again, it's looking like. Which I think is a bit of a shame when, you know, a player doesn't get a send-off and it ends a bit, not too ugly, but just, it's not how you want to leave a club, I don't think. But yeah, I think Brentford still have enough attacking threat to score, and I just haven't seen anything from Southampton that makes me think they can really put up a fight.
Yeah, all right. Well, seeing as you've gone 2-0, I think I'm gonna go 1-0.
Oh.
I think, like you said, I think Brentford look solid. They look organised. They look kind of everything you'd expect Thomas Frank's teams to look like. I think Southampton, I echo, will probably have a decent amount of the ball, but again, I don't see them creating anything. And with how structured and kind of organised Brentford are, again, I don't see them getting through, even if they do create some half chances. So I'm going to go with 1-0.
Yep, very good. And then afterwards we have Everton Bournemouth.
All right, well, I'll go first with this one. I'm going to go 1-0 Bournemouth. I think away at Goodison's never easy, but I just don't see Everton getting any points anywhere at the moment. I'm tempted to go a little bit more convincingly, but I think Bournemouth haven't started the season electric. They were obviously decent against Newcastle, but like we said, didn't actually create that much. So I'm going to go the 1-0.
I've gone with a 2-1 Bournemouth. I think I do like a few of Bournemouth's players. They're surely going to win. I mean, who knows when Everton will get a point. But you know what? I'm gonna say that Everton managed to score. I'm gonna have some faith in them that maybe McNeil or something will be able to get in a nice goal, or it could be obviously extremely scrappy. After that, we have Ipswich Fulham.
Yeah, well, go on, you go first for Ipswich Fulham.
Okay, I have gone with 2-1 Fulham. I think that I think this could actually be quite a good game to watch. Obviously, Ipswich aren't afraid to attack anyone. They have that sort of belief in themselves, and they sort of they can somewhat create a decent defensive line. Obviously, against City, it's very tough. But I remember their game against Liverpool. That first half, they did play very well. And if they can match that against Fulham, it could be very tight. But ultimately, Fulham have that extra bit of quality. I can see them edging it.
Well, I can show you my notebook, but I've done the exact same thing. I've gone 2-1 Fulham. I feel Ipswich at home, they're probably going to get something, maybe a goal. But I think, like you said, I think Fulham just have that extra little bit of quality. I don't see him losing to Ipswich.
No. And then next up, another one of the newcomers, as it were. Leicester at home to Villa. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Leicester at home is obviously a different thing. The atmosphere was flat until they scored against Spurs, by all accounts. So maybe it's not going to be the fortress they probably need it to be if they're going to survive. I think Villa have been okay to start the season, but didn't really set the world on fire in either game. But I don't see them faltering this week. I think this is the week that Villa's season really starts, and I'm going to go 2-0 Villa.
I've gone 2-0 as well. We're not just copying each other. We just think very similarly. But yeah, I don't see anything but a Villa win. I mean, they'd have to be very complacent to not win there, obviously, as any team would. Still not over that. Okay, next is Forest Wolves, which could be a big game. Could be a very big game. I think it'd be low scoring. I've gone with nothing between the sides, a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I was tempted to do the exact same, if I'm honest, but I just think Forest have a tiny bit more quality in the final third than Wolves. So I'm going to go with Forest to edge it, and I'm going to go the 1-0.
No, yeah, I can see that, but I have a bit of faith in Wolves to, just I think it could give them a little boost if they get something away at Forest. And then the final game on Saturday is West Ham at home to Man City.
Yeah, I'm trying to wriggle my way into some tickets before we go up to Manchester on Sunday, but I'm not sure how successful I'll be. I see City winning the game because I see City winning every single game ever. But I do see West Ham scoring. I see maybe one on a set piece or something. But again, I just don't see any way City don't win. So I'm going to go 3-1 Man City.
You're not going to believe what I've predicted. I'm going to say that Bowen will score for West Ham. There we go. Make it a little different. But yeah, City are just... too good. I don't see West Ham being able to put up too much of a fight. They might make it a little more uncomfortable than last season, but I mean, yeah, I don't think they'll get too much blame for a 3-1 loss. Then moving into Sunday, we have Chelsea against Palace, which after that Wolves game could be quite interesting. And I've actually gone for a Chelsea win, a 2-1 over Palace. I think Eze will get off the mark this season, even though he technically kind of did in game week 1. But yeah, I think this could be the start of a good run for Chelsea. They could start picking up some points, and we could start seeing really what they've made of.
Well, I'm going with Palace to end before the international break miserably. I think they've had a poor start, and I think that will continue for another week. And I'm going to go with 4-1 Chelsea.
4-1. Ooh. Another Madueke hat-trick. Okay, the next game is one we don't need to worry about. I don't think anyone should watch it. It's Newcastle at home to Spurs. This always goes perfectly fine, and I'm not at all frightened to watch it.
Well, I'm going to feed into the little bit of Spurs shrink when they're under a little bit of pressure. I think St James's is a tough place to go, and I don't think Newcastle's season has just started quite yet. The way Spurs faltered away at Leicester obviously sticks in my mind, and I'm going to go with 0-0.
0-0. Well, I've gone very differently with this one. I've gone with a 3-2 Newcastle.
Oh wow!
I know. I just think they'll turn it on against us, but it won't be like the previous 2 years. We'll put up a better fight, and there'll be some dodgy decision that stops us equalising, and we can blame that for the performance. And then the final game. Did you know this game was on? Man United Liverpool.
Oh well, no. Well, when's that? Well, as I'm sure you can imagine, I've got to be optimistic here. I think Liverpool have started the season very professionally, very, very ready. This is the week they're going to start making mistakes. I think Old Trafford is a tough place to go for a new manager, especially a new Liverpool manager. And despite how comfortable they've looked at home and how comfortable they've looked on and off the ball, this isn't a Liverpool team of big personalities. You've got Salah, you've got Van Dijk. The rest of them aren't leaders. There's no Jordan Henderson. There's no kind of Steven Gerrard. There's no Jurgen Klopp. This is a group that I'm hoping of personalities that sink under the pressure of Old Trafford. I'm going to go with an optimistic 3-1 Man United.
Oh, that's very interesting. Because I've gone with a 3-1 Liverpool win. I still don't know what to make of your lot.
No one does.
Well, exactly. I mean, yeah, you could win it 5-0, and then you'll lose to Ipswich. Yeah, I just think Liverpool have got too much quality to not at least score twice. I think you'll take the lead, but I think in the end Liverpool will be able to win it.
I think the one thing I'd say was Liverpool at home was what turned Eric's start around at Man United. Lost away at Brighton. Oh, lost at home to Brighton, sorry. Got battered away at Brentford. And then we came to Old Trafford, Liverpool on a Monday night, and Liverpool were flying to start the season. We looked terrible. And it was Jadon Sancho's goal that won the game. I think this could be the game where Eric's Man United career kind of restarts. A big win against Liverpool.
Or ends.
Well, yeah. I'm going with restarts, but yeah. I think this is the game for him. And obviously, like you said, if it is a loss, I'm not sure how much more time he's going to get, because games are really important now. I mean, he's on borrowed time, but a win against Liverpool and suddenly he'll be back going into the international break on a real positive.
Yeah, I mean, look, he got a 1 year contract extension. He's not necessarily going to be, one that's got 100% faith in him. And after the international break, you've got Southampton away, but I mean, surely you'd win that. So I feel like it's not the end of the world if you lose, depending A, how you lose, and B, how big's the scoreline. But yeah, I think you'll be fine, and you should be able to bounce straight back from it after the break. Okay, so they are predictions for the final game week before the international break. And, let's hope one of us gets them all right. Thank you for joining us. A like and a follow is greatly appreciated. And don't forget, you can rate if you're listening on Spotify. This has been Football with the Faff. Goodbye.